Yeah, so it's, as I was saying, it's one thing to say, hey, do prevention over, fight fires and troubleshoot and stuff when things come up. But I think a lot of people question, what does that actually mean? What does preventative care look like? I mean, we in the zoo we use the word husbandry all the time. Husbandry is how we care for the animals. Husbandry is the cleaning and the feeding regime. It's the safety checks that we do. It's how you look after your animal. That word doesn't really come into the pet world very much, and so a lot of what our 7 pillars are for getting rid of those diseases and extending lifespan is husbandry routine. That's why it's so easy to implement, because you're already feeding, you're already giving them various things, you already have a routine with them. It's your husbandry practice, and we're just up leveling it. But there are other dimensions of being a responsible pet parent or preventative stuff in their life that goes way beyond that sort of normal, we're already doing it, husbandry stuff. So I think maybe exploding and expanding that out a bit helps people to kind of connect with, oh, didn't even think about that. Thanks for suggesting it. So I don't know if that's the same in the human world or not, but I think.
Well, elaborate more on that. So what do you mean by that?
So I think it's really underrated that we know our pets' normals, and even that we know our own normals. And if I'm brutally honest, I have to put my hand up and say, yeah, I'm guilty about that, because I don't know my normals, right? So there's definitely room for me to be improving here too, right? But knowing your pet's normals, and I had a client yesterday, and there was a question mark as to whether or not the condition that one vet was just starting to be a little concerned about, and another vet was like, no, that's fine. There was a second opinion. So I was like, okay, well, the way to ascertain this is for you to, at home, where there are no stressful, stimuli, right? For example, because if you go to the vet and then you try and take the resting heart rate or the blood pressure, it's going to be elevated, right? Because you've just been caught up and stuck in a box, driven in the car, got there, everything smells like dog, and there's someone with antiseptic, right? It's not your favorite thing. So as a cat, your elevations are going, right? So to understand the resting heart rate and your normals, really it is you at home when they're asleep on the sofa next to you or something, just to go, okay, let's just time that for 30 seconds and count how many times they're breathing. Or get yourself an inexpensive stethoscope and then be able to listen and go, okay, this many beats per minute is normal for my baby. So then when we have those moments of, okay, is this a heart murmur? Is this an abnormal thing? Is this a stress response? Is this a whatever? You've got a baseline to compare to. So knowing your pet's normals, and that's why I talk about a pet health journal, for example. But beyond that as well, then there's, okay, well, what about emergencies? What about natural disasters? And I live in very benign, safe, middle of the ground, very tepid England now. So there's not very many natural disasters, right? If you live down in Somerset, you'll get flooded inevitably. But apart from that, whereas back home, every year there were bushfire things, there were flood alerts, there was lightning strikes. I mean, it's pretty hectic down under. So living with natural disasters was much more normal. And as a Californian, I'm sure you get that too, right? So what have you got set up to do an evacuation? And I remember, oh my gosh, it's like etched in my brain, and I wish it would go away, those images of Katrina, like the Hurricane Katrina, where people were, on roofs with their pets, and people were having to leave their pets behind because the emergency rescue people wouldn't let you come with your pets. Like, it was just, and then thank God the laws changed as a result of that disaster. But so many people were just, they weren't prepared. They didn't have anything to kit their kids up with. And so that's why the shelters weren't allowing you to evacuate, because where do you put the dogs? Have you got restraints for them? What if they fight? So having an emergency evacuation kit, what do you do when the bushfires come? I nearly, literally nearly lost some of my very best friends, human this is, in bushfires, because they're just so unpredictable. And the wind changes, and you think you're safe, and the wind changes, and 3.5 seconds later, you've got 4 milliseconds to get out or you're gone. Jeez. So there's no messing around with some of these things. And so if you don't have a kit that you can go yoink and pick up and run, you're not really prepared. And then what do? You're running and you know that you've left your dogs behind. You can't deal with that. You can't. So then you go back and then you die, right? So it's serious stuff. So these are, I didn't mean to get all heavy, but like being prepared, like I should have been a Boy Scout maybe. Isn't that their motto? Like, you know, three of these and like dib or something. Like, and all the women in our audience just going, "What? We need some men in the audience to correct me on this." But like, being prepared is real. So I guess that's my point.
Yeah, well, that went heavy quick. Yeah, I mean, you touched on two important aspects. The first one, knowing your normals. I like that you pointed out that you're not great at this for yourself. I see this a lot where people come to me like where they either come to me without like the proper blood work, proper labs, or they have one set and that's it. And it's like, okay, well, what's been happening? Is this like, how does this compare to what your normal is? What's the trend of this? Because if you look at anything at one point in time, it really doesn't tell you that much. I mean, we see the same thing with human blood pressure. It's called the white coat effect, because you go into the doctor's office and there's a white coat and it's like, there's a lot happening. And also they don't, you're supposed to sit for 5 minutes before you take your blood pressure. Who does that? No, you get up, you walk across the hospital, whatever, doctor's office, and they do it. So
in a 7-minute appointment, you've got to spend 5 minutes sat there.
Yeah, sitting, waiting for your, yeah, exactly. So, but right. And if we don't know which way you're trending, if we don't know if something's normal, abnormal, like it's not enough information. And that's if we're looking deeper, even on a symptom level. One of the first questions that you're asked when you go see a provider is, okay, well, how long has this been going on? But I think there's a lack of awareness around a lot of it in terms of how long things have been happening and when they started, and things get kind of fuzzy because we get used to living with symptoms. So this idea of knowing your normals is so important, because once you get to optimal health, you want to stay there, right?
Yeah, I do.
Isn't that the dream? And if you're able to pinpoint really quickly when something is shifting, then you can get on top of it. I talk about vitamin deficiencies a lot in these conversations because they're just so prevalent. I see them all the time. And by the time people generally catch them, it's at dangerous levels. Versus if you were monitoring regularly, you would have seen, we have a slight dip in vitamin D or B12 or whatever, omega-3s, and now we can course correct. But we because we don't know what's happening, we don't know what the normal is, we wait until we see a symptom and then we try to figure it out. And by that point, it's so far gone. So yeah, I mean, it's extremely.
So here's the thing, because I've already confessed my sins and said that I don't really know my normals, but I'm going to have to confess another sin and say, well, I don't even know that I've actually had tests done on me. So I'm such a bad example. As a very naughty and naive patient coming, who do I ask to get a baseline panel, right? And these original markers that then in the future I'm going to refer back to.
That's what's hard, because if you go to a GP or a PCP, they're often that's not the bulk of what they do. It's not usually preventative work. So if you go in wanting a kind of baseline panel, if you bring that to them and chat with them, they'll usually order some, especially if you haven't had anything. It'll be kind of like your annual, basically. And they'll do like your CBC, your CMP, like your pretty basic stuff, but you can absolutely ask for more. You can ask for things like, hey, can I get my vitamin D levels checked? I haven't had it checked in 10 years, or, I had a deficiency or whatever. Like, you can be honest or not be honest. That's on you how you ask for it. But, you can ask for things like an advanced lipid panel, which will tell you more about better markers of your heart health versus just HDL, LDL cholesterol. You can ask for things like vitamin D, B12, omega-3 index. I mean, these are things that we should absolutely just know. An iron panel. Again, these are like so foundational and not looked at. So
are all of these blood test markers so we need to draw blood to do that, or are there some things that for people who are a bit like needles, blood, comfortable doing that they can start that way? Not that I'm worried about needles, but I just
realistically, if you're wanting to get, so we can look at urine for some things. Some things we just straight up can't. Like for example, you can't figure out what your vitamin D or your B12 is from a urine test. So most of these things we can't figure out the size and shape of your red blood cells to see if you have anemia through your urine. So really we do want to be looking at the urine or at the blood as well. Some tests you can, these are more like advanced functional testing. You can look at urine instead of blood, but you're going to get a better marker of long-term status by looking at blood versus looking at urine. Urine is more like transient. It changes pretty quickly versus blood is going to be your long-term. So yeah, so looking at like foundational stuff, look at an advanced lipid panel, look at those vitamins that I mentioned. Also look at your fasting glucose, your fasting insulin. Fasting insulin is one no one looks at, but really should be looked at to identify before diabetes develops. Is it starting? Is insulin resistance starting? So fasting glucose, fasting insulin, hemoglobin A1C, just so easy. And most of these are, for folks in the US with the insurance and everything, most of them are covered by your foundational insurance if your doctor can put it in correctly, and they should be able to. So I guess try to find someone who values preventative. And, we've talked about this a lot, right? Building a healthcare team that you feel supported by, someone that you feel like listens to you and values what you value. And if you value preventative and this person doesn't, that's not going to be a good match. But also, if you have like a functional provider, they can order, like I order tests for folks all the time. So it just depends who your team is.
And then, so you go in, you give that blood, and the panel goes off to pathology or wherever. And how long does that take? And then how do people interpret the results?
Okay, this is actually a really interesting point that I'm glad you brought up. Half the time, my patients never get a call back from their doctor.
What?
I would say more than half the time. I would say that's the norm.
It's like taking an exam and never finding out your grade.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll get like a message from like an assistant saying like, doc says you're fine, even though there's like obvious deficiencies. Or it'll be like, oh, doc says that your vitamin D is a little low, take 1,000 IUs. Whereas like their vitamin D is so low, they need to be taking 10,000 IUs a day. So, and then sometimes it's like, they have anemia and they're not even told, or they have pre-diabetes and they're not even told. So that's a really important aspect that I'm really glad you brought up.
I don't even understand how that is a thing. How can your doctor see things that are concerning your health and not tell the patient, not tell you?
When I look through people's medical records, like when we start working together, I'll find diagnoses they never knew they had. Their doctor wrote it in their notes and they never even told them. Like, oh, hey, so-and-so, like you didn't mention you had type 2 diabetes. I have type 2 diabetes? What? It's like, okay, let's start over. Like, these are the notes from your doctor.
Maybe we need to change the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm and tell all the information.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's me being bewildered. Carry on.
Well, the reason I hesitated is because the Hippocratic Oath wasn't even, Hippocrates never actually said it.
Oh, okay, fine.
And I'm like, do we go down that rabbit hole? Probably not. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We're both huge proponents of giving people the information, because when you don't know, that's the whole point. If you don't know, you can't do anything about it. So at least,
it's definitely a case.
You're not going to support people. At least what?
Definitely a case of ignorance is not bliss.
Definitely not. Definitely not. So yes, Penny, I'm gonna gently, harshly show you to get some preventative blood work done and be proactive. Hey, okay, I'll make you a deal. Make you a deal.
Go then.
If you go get some blood work done to know your normals, I will build an emergency kit for my pets.
Ooh,
okay.
Okay.
Deal?
Emergency or evacuation? Are we talking a first aid one or a get out?
I have an evac kit for us. So
Okay.
I could pretty easily.
Can I just pause there and go, well done, because almost nobody does. So
something. Yeah. It's something. It could definitely be beefed up. So I can definitely beef it up, add some things for the kiddos. That's a must need. And I have a little first aid, little holistic first aid kit I've been building, but it's not fully fleshed out. So I will expand both if you get your blood work done.
All right.
Deal?
We're on.
We're going to have to come back and report.
I know my blood type. Do you know most people in the UK don't know their blood type? Or at least when I've done box pops and just gone and say, well, out of curiosity, what's your blood type? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, how do you
know? How many people don't know their blood type? It's like a pretty big number of people here in the US too. Yeah.
Yeah.
My gosh, I don't know. It just feels like just all of this. It's just not normal. Like I shouldn't say it's not normal. It's not the norm. It's not the norm.
It's so weird that we go to school for all these hundreds of years or however long, academically we are, but like we go to school for years, like let's put it there. Okay. And we don't learn anything about money and we don't learn anything about health. Yeah. I mean, they're pretty foundational, important things in life. Who learned about investing and, I don't know what to do with money, how the economy works and setting yourself up. So I didn't learn any of that at school. Did I learn anything about health? Well, yeah, a little bit, like eat vitamins and minerals and things, but like nothing to do with, and it's just like, okay, well, there's all those, capital countries, capital cities of the world that I learned in geography or contour lines on the map or dates in history or, literary poems or whatever. And I'm just like, well, that was fun and all, but kind of nice if I could be healthy and rich at the same time.
I didn't have a health class until I was in high school.
Yeah, that would be the same with me.
Like nothing at all. And I'm speechless. Yeah. And now, I mean, this is a whole nother rabbit hole. Now they're taking away physical education classes here in the US. That's like a really big thing. Sometimes I work with teenagers. I love working with teenagers. Teenagers are like cats. You really have to earn their trust, and I so appreciate that. Anyway, I digress. I work with teens who don't even get like a recess free time, like no outdoor movement time. Even lunchtime has to be at their desk in their classroom.
What?
They spend all day inside sitting in one spot for 7 hours. No sunlight, no movement, like no health education, no exercise. It's pretty grim.
That's awful.
Yeah. And then we become adults, and then, people talk about like, oh, the obesity epidemic and these epidemics, and like you need to take better care of yourself. And it's like we've set people up in a model where we don't know how to take care of ourselves. You're a very well-educated person. You know about anatomy, physiology, health, and you're like, what are even foundational labs I can get done? Because you've had to study it on the pet side, but like, no, it's not even common knowledge on the human side. No. And even as a dietitian, registered dietitians also don't get a lot of education in it. This is my postgraduate training in functional medicine about really how to look at it. So it's like, we're not even equipping our healthcare professionals to really understand it.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So I guess that's probably, I know for me, that's and likely for you, but I know for me, that's like one of my big drivers for being so focused on education, because I know how incredibly life-changing it is, and also that none of us are getting enough of it.
Yeah, in the areas that actually really make a difference in your life, in your quality of life.
About yourself, about how you can be empowered to feel better and live longer and younger and all of the things. When I went to grad school, I had to write like a statement of intent, basically.
Yeah.
And my statement of intent was like, I have no idea what I'm gonna write this about. Like, what do you like? How do you know? Anyway, I ended up writing it about the fact that I didn't get education in the area of health. And that because of that, it's become like an obsession of mine. And that this is just part of my obsession, was to now go to grad school and continue learning about health. Clearly it worked because I got in. But yeah, I think everyone needs to be more empowered with it. And it allows you, circling back, it allows you to take that proactive, that preventative, because otherwise you're never going to learn anything about it until you run into something.
Right.
At that point, it's putting out the fires.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's enjoyable. I think it's fun. I think it's fulfilling, like mentally stimulating to be proactive, to learn what you can do to do it. And it's like, it's satisfying, you know?
Like, yeah, I mean, it is for me as well. I get that. I mean, we're sort of, there's no secret that we're nerds and we love to learn and do that. But also I think you don't have to dive into the levels that we do. You can take, I mean, there is so much information there, so many different ways you can access it, process it, do stuff with it, and subtopics within subtopics. So just focus on what you like. You doesn't even have to be an expert in everything. Just focus on what you like and learn those things. And the other nice thing about it is that it's so easy to do. Like going back to those contour lines and things, for example, like how many times have contour lines been helpful in my life? Well, yeah, when I've been hiking and looking at the map, yes. But for the most part, right, there's a relatively useless piece of knowledge. And, you know, certainly some of my, you know, applied calculus and some of the maths things, that, like, if I use them, no, of course not, right? But I still have to learn them. And you don't see the reward for the effort that you put in to learn it. And this is my point, is that you only need to learn like the tiniest thing. And then the reward on the end is pretty quick, pretty obvious, and pretty satisfying. So you're like, okay, I'll do that again on another thing. And you can acquire that way and really get great results ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's all rewarding, especially if you can do it with your pet. I mean, that's the whole point of all this, right? Is because then you see them reaping those benefits, and that makes it all worth it.
Yeah, and
the peace of mind to know that you're prepared. That's really big.
Yeah, no, that's
someone with anxiety. Like, this is for you. Like, do the preventative, do the proactive, because it really does bring a lot of peace of mind. It really does. So in tomorrow's workshop, tomorrow's our first aid, building your not so basic pet emergency first aid kit. That's what it's all about. It's about, and you're going to be talking more about all of this, knowing your normals, the difference between emergency kit versus first aid kit, which I'm really keen to hear more about, since apparently I need to differentiate my two, and really how to build this out. And I think it is one of those things, to your point, where you can go deeper if you want to go deeper. And especially since we're going to have Dr. Jeff, who's now joining us, and he's going to be giving us some tips on, he's going to be talking about a few different like first aid emergency situations, and how to actually do the hands-on stuff. I've never taken a pet first aid course before, so I'm really looking forward to that as well. And we'll share resources for folks too, if they want to go deeper, if they want to learn more.
Yeah, of course.
But this is a really solid foundation and a really unique perspective on it versus just buying that kit off the shelf, which can be a good starting place, but not quite enough.
Yeah, and that certainly was my experience. I think the first time I did pet first aid. It was actually wildlife first aid for wildlife rescues with some charities back home that after the bushfire. So it was a big emphasis on burns, but dehydration and other things as well. And, you know, we were sitting in that class learning all the things, and it was really helpful. And there was like, okay, so now where do we buy the kit? So, you know, you want that next, so you like, okay, yes, I believe this is important. I'm now engaged. I now have my skill set. Where do I go buy? And they're like, well, so what you need to do is go to St. John's Ambulance and buy the human kit, which looks like this. And then you'll have to go and buy all these things separately because it doesn't. And I was just like, oh, well, that just made it hard work. Right. And there aren't, you know, the other things as well, like sometimes people when they're doing CPR, they do not mind putting their dog's entire snout inside their mouth, which is kind of what you have to do depending on how big their snout is, right? So other people do. So you've got a face guard. Well, in a human kit, your face guard is a flat face guard so that you don't get anyone else's saliva when you're reviving them. But right, you've got to have a special one for doing dogs, right? Or you've got to know how do you hold their side lips. I call them side lips because, of course, they've got their snout, right? So they've got this is official anatomy, mind you. So that you got to hold their side lips down so that when you puff in, right, that their cheeks don't go and all your air puffs out here before it goes into the lungs. So there's special things that you have to know that is different, right, from working with. So your kit is going to be specialized and tailored and you know, breed specific, right? You know, a red setter and a pug, right? Very different faces, very different things you're going to be doing, right?
You can almost use a human one on a pug.
Right? Pediatric one. And in fact, a pediatric kit is a good one to start with for a lot of things because everything's scaled down. And of course, as well, when you're doing CPR, you're not going to use your whole hand like this, right? You're going to be doing, you know, fingers and stuff like that. So it's a good thing to do pediatric first aid because that does have much more translation across. But even then, you still. Anyway, my point is that
we'll get through tomorrow.
that there's a lot to getting it right for pets, and it's not hard. It's not hard, but you can't just go in and buy the 2.0 pet parent first aid kit that satisfies your needs. There's not going to have any emotional stuff in there. There's not going to be, you know, breed specific stuff in there or anything, right? So anyway.
Well, to be continued tomorrow. Was 90 minutes. Now we're doing 2 hours because, you know,
and that was still really hard to do.
So join us tomorrow, 2-hour first aid workshop. You can sign up to Facebook page, YouTube, emails, all of the places we're sharing the links. And we will see you there.